I was a civic engagement political awareness chair. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that role was me helping equip young folks, young professionals, I should say, with the knowledge and skills that they need to make change in their community. And one thing I always tell people is you don't have to run for office to make change. There are a lot of different ways in which you can get involved. It could be something as simple as phone banking for a candidate that you believe in. It can be something like joining an advisory board in your community, because they have power and they have, authority and oversight in some cases. There's a lot of different ways that folks can get involved. And I'd rather be kind of that motivating force to help people understand that system, because it's not something we're taught. And it's definitely not something that Black folks are taught and marginalized people are taught, because that's a tool to help build your power. And the people who want to oppress us don't want us to have those tools.
You're clearly in and around government. So that's what made me ask that question. When you said get involved in an advisory council, I'd never thought about that. I love walking, and having, walkability in my community makes a difference for me. And I don't want to be on the city council or run for an office, but if they had an advisory board that had to do with walkability or, anything related to that, I would certainly be interested. And it's not something that would have crossed my mind. And I'm sure there are many listeners who, like me, were like, oh yeah, there are other roles, aren't there? Since you threw out a few, and you've obviously worked in and around government for a while, are there maybe two other ways that citizens could get involved that we don't really think about in our community?
Yeah. I mean, getting involved in political parties is paramount for us. And the reason why I say that is our parties, particularly the two major parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, have an outsized influence on who represents us. They they do have a monopoly on deciding who we even get the choice to vote on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times we think, oh, well, the person who's on the ballot, they clearly went through this vetting process and they went through this whole, to get to where they are. No, sometimes they're chosen. They're recruited by people to be in those spaces, particularly local parties. And so I've always encouraged people to get involved at that local party level, to be in the room when conversations are had about who should be recruited, who should be supported. Financial support of candidates is almost the number one reason why people either win or can't win in office. And that's financial support usually starts at the local party level, because it's not just about what the party's giving, it's about all the doors that they're unlocking for folks to be able to fundraise. And so if you have someone you said, why would I run for office? I'll just kind of quickly role play what that would look like. Even if I were interested, I would have to go to the local party, start building those relationships. Well, first of all, they kind of take a look at me and make sure I'm okay, that I'm someone they want to put out in this kind of position. But then I really have to go and talk to donors and spend a whole lot of time fundraising, calling folks that I know to say, hey, can you send $5, $100, $1,000, whatever it may be. And then you really do have to stay on message with what your local, state, and national party, depending upon what office you're running for. What's the message in there? Because if you don't, the last thing you want is your party working against you and your nomination.
Mm-hmm.
So I say all that to say local parties is something that we need to be paying attention to, because these folks have an outsized influence on who we see on our ballot. So that's one. A second way is joining organizations like the Urban League, like the NAACP. These organizations, while they're vast and they're huge, you can also join some smaller organizations as well and get your toes wet, dip your toes in the water of advocacy. It will allow you to find community with people who are like-minded, as well as make a difference.
Let's say I join my local NAACP. What role might I play in forwarding government?
So the good thing about these kind of volunteer experiences is that you really play the role you want to play and you have the capacity to play. So for instance, if the Urban League or the NAACP are doing advocacy work on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That might look like being a part of a phone bank, calling your senators and your House members to say, this is a priority for our community. We need you to be on board with this. And that moves the needle. I remember there was a big piece of legislation that was really moved by the number of phone calls and letters that literally flooded and kind of broke the phone system in the Capitol. It might also look like meeting with legislators. The great thing about having, being attached to a known name like the NAACP or the Urban League is that you could probably get more meetings that way. Sad to say, but if someone calls up an elected official and say, "Hi, I'm Kwame with the Urban League, and I want to talk to you about this bill that's moving through the California State Assembly," you're probably more likely to get that because they do have influence. And the last thing that some legislators want is, the NAACP or the Urban League not agreeing with them on an issue and bringing kind of that pressure. So it looks different ways. I will also say this. I've met some of my best friends who've helped me really kind of navigate this move to California over the last 4 years through the Urban League Young Professionals. And so as much as it is about giving and advocacy work, it's also a great place to meet some really great people too.